not even connecting, noticing it. I'm becoming my father. I come home from work. I don't even go anywhere. I sit there, stop at the liquor store, whatever, get whatever, sit home, drink, watch TV, drink, go to sleep. So now, not even realize that I'm becoming what my father was. This man I resented, this man I could not stand because of how we lived and everything. I was becoming him.
Hey y'all, what's going on? Welcome back to the Stacking Days podcast. I'm your host as always, Ray Donovan. Looking forward to getting into our conversation today with the brother who we have. Just a little backstory. He and I have been chatting offline and about just kind of, more brothers stepping into the space and being unapologetic and open about their own journeys with alcohol use, abuse, addiction, sobriety, recovery. Just so that we can, start really promoting the conversation around our own health in terms of how we've chosen to cope with life in the past. So today we got Leonard Murphy with us. He's a sobriety and recovery and life coach. Really excited to get into his journey. So without further ado, Leonard, welcome to Stacking Days.
Hey, thanks, Ray. Glad to be here. Anna, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Absolutely, brother. Appreciate you being here and spending some time with me today. Let's just jump right into it and do what we came here for. Let's go all the way back to the beginning of your journey and your relationship with alcohol, and we'll take it from day one and move through chronologically until where we are today.
Oh, sure. Wow, where to begin, right? So I
Yeah.
guess we could start. I'll start from my childhood, the way I was first introduced to alcohol. Basically, is in my household. Grew up in housing projects in Brooklyn, New York, and lived with my mother and father. Now, my mother and father, they were they were the best. They loved me and my sister. I have a younger sister. She's 4 years younger, and they were great. They loved me. And I always felt loved. Put it like that.
Hmm.
Thing was, my father was an alcoholic, and was as time grew on. As a young child, I always saw my father drink every day. Like he would go to work, come home, sit in the corner, and just drink beer, different alcohol, drinks, all up until he went to bed at night. So that kind of something I saw as a youngster, and just not thought nothing of it. That's what daddy does every day. But
Yeah.
as I got older, I started to, of course, as you get older, you start to recognize different things. So I started to pay attention, recognize the change of his behavior. Um, you know, Things would happen. So, and I just saw how alcohol really affected him. And now I knew why he was behaving the way he was is because of his drinking. As I got older, I started to recognize it, and it bothered me because I was like, "Wow, daddy's acting this way," and I know it's because he's drinking. Like we would go out, and he would be drunk, different things, and I was like, and he was a diet. The thing was, he was a diabetic, so he was sick. He had childhood diabetes, and I remember one day as a teenager, I was probably about 16, 17. Now my father, he passed away the day before my 18th birthday.
Okay.
So I was probably about 17 years old, 16, and I heard him and my mother having a conversation. The doctor had told him he has to stop drinking, or he's is it's going to be the death of him.
Hmm.
And I know my mother, and again, that generation, it was like the man of the house. Hey, you don't question him. He does what he wants to do. If he drinks, more. My mother was an enabler, which she probably didn't realize she was enabling him, but that's what she did. She never told him to stop, never told him, from what I saw anyway, never showed concern. It was just what he does. This is what daddy does. So I asked her, I
Hmm.
said, why doesn't he just stop drinking if the doctor told him he's going to die? Simply. And my mother said to me, leave your father alone. That's what makes him happy. Just let him
Hmm.
be, So I was like, wow, like, I don't understand. And then the day before my 18th birthday, he passed away. He said because of this disease, the drinking.
Did,
And
did he just kind of slowly start passing away, or was it more sudden from your experience?
you know what, Ray? That's a great question because it's funny. I saw the deterioration like the last few years before he died. I saw, his depression. If I think, and I always think back now. I remember like he was more depressed. He wasn't happy. And he was an introverted man as it was, but I mean, it was to the point where he didn't speak to us for a couple of days, or
Yeah.
he sat in the corner. I saw the drinking start. start earlier, last longer, throughout the day. I saw that he just wasn't a happy man, and just tell that he was losing more weight, disheveled clothing, never, he was a, I remember my father, he was suit and tie, sharp man, growing up. And then right before he passed, I mean, he was a guy, didn't take care of himself, hygiene, no haircut, no anything. So I saw it coming. So yeah, to answer your
Okay.
question, it was just slowly but surely, like, he went through that, and, you know, he ended up passing away because of this disease. And not, then I usually later found out there was some drugs involved as well. So
Okay.
that's what it was.
Okay. I'm sorry to hear that, bro.
I don't know. Thank you.
So how did that impact you? I mean, you're 18 years old. You're a young man about to step into the next chapter of his life. No longer a boy in this, in this country of ours. Obviously, that's carries its own burden. But you got to do it without your father. Your mom is probably just trying to hold things together at that point with your sister,
Yeah.
who's 4 years younger than you are. So, what does this next chapter of your life look like?
Wow. So, yeah. So he passed away. I was a senior in high school. I was about to go to college, and he passed away in February. I was a senior in high school, so going to college that next fall.
Hmm.
He passed away. And again, my mother, he ran everything in the household. So we didn't even know if we had insurance. We like accidentally found an insurance policy in his drawer, hidden under all this. As my mother's cleaning up, she found the insurance policy. So that kept us on our feet for a little bit. And I went over. I didn't even know how I was going to get to college. I'm lucky we made some phone calls. I just hustled, and I pretty much, me and my mother was just trying to figure out a way how we get into college. We didn't have any money. My father took care of everything. He was the breadwinner. He handled all the finances. So, by the grace of God, I got into school, and my mother just, she held it together. I gotta admit, it was me, her, and my sister. She had to go back to work, and she got us on that path. And I always knew at an early age. My mother always told me, after high school, you go to college. There's no there's no negotiation about that. You go into college. She always stressed the importance of education, and
Okay.
bringing a good life for yourself. And that
Is your
was
is
one
your
thing. Okay.
are your folks of Caribbean descent?
No, no, they're both from down
No.
south, South
Okay. I
Carolina,
only
both
ask
of them.
because
Yeah.
I only ask because Brooklyn is got a heavy
Oh yeah, big
Caribbean
time.
community,
Yeah,
which is good. I mean, I think highlighting education is always the way to go. So
right,
sorry for
definitely.
interrupting you.
So yeah, she was always stressing that. So got into school, and this is where, like, I started. I got over the death of my father, and and I'm sure I'll get into this later in the conversation, but I had a strong resentment for my father, especially right before he passed away.
Hmm.
And as later in life, especially when I got sober, I kind of realized it. But I just wasn't happy with how we were living. We lived in the projects, and it's funny, they did not. My mother and father did not let me play with any of the children that lived in the projects. I had to go up the block to my cousins and play with them. Now they lived in better. They lived in what's called a co-op, so it was an apartment building. Every middle class. People cared about where they lived in the projects. I don't know if you've ever been to housing projects in Brooklyn back in the days. It was a lot of dirty. People didn't care about it. People didn't care about where they take care of where they lived anyway. So
Hmm.
I hated living there. I was like, why? And especially when I used to go play with my friends who lived in whole different neighborhood, which is only up the block. And I was like, why are we living here? And I just felt that, especially as I got to my teenage years, I was like, we're not doing anything. You're just late. I felt that he was lazy and had no ambition, and I knew it was because of the drinking.
Hmm.
So I went to college, and this is the first time I was on my own. So first time I'm in college, went to roomed with my best friend. So we went to college, and I was an introvert. Well, still an introverted. So, um, you know, now I'm in school, and I'm on my own. I have freedom. There's parties, there's fraternities, there's women. So I'm like, whoa. So I just had to, I'm so shy and just never been around this. And, I started, drinking, college scene, Thursday to Saturday, you're drinking. So I started
Hmm.
drinking a little bit here and there, and even I think I took my first drink when I was like 15 years old. I got sick, came home throwing up. My parents were laughing at me. They was like, good for you. Now you know not to drink. And it's true. I
Right.
kind of like was like stayed away from it. Like I was scared because I was sick. I got sick. But then I kind of always remembered that that feeling I had before I got sick was like I was the life of the party. Even at a young age of 15, I was making everybody laugh and everything.
Yeah.
So in college, I kind of went back to that. Like I was like, this gave me the courage to go up to women and talk to them. This gave me the courage to go hang out. This gave me the courage to talk. To I had that confidence built up in me. Like again, like you said, my father passed away at a young age. I was didn't learn so many lessons from him. I was becoming a man. And no one
Yeah.
was guiding me. You know what I mean? I didn't have my father.
How
So
did how did you how did you balance in that, I mean, and thinking back on that time in your life, how did you balance this desire to feel a certain way in your new environment, knowing that the thing that was making you feel that way was in large part, a contributing factor to your father's passing, and also, as you said, your circumstance in life up until that point. Was that connection being made at 18, or it was just way too chaotic for you to have that moment of connectivity?
yeah, I really didn't. And it's not until I got sober or was on the way to getting sober that I really saw the connection. I was like,
Yeah,
this is what I want to do. And again, still was angry. I was just angry at my father. Some deep, like, I was just like, whatever. He's gone now. He didn't care. And about living. And I was just out there. I didn't see any connection. I was just out
yeah,
there. This is my thing. Back then my thinking was I want to go talk to girls. I want to party. I want to be part of the social scene in
yeah.
college. This is my chance to have fun and hang out. This is what I want to do. And drinking was the only thing that allowed me to do so and feel
Yeah.
comfortable and pumped away.
No, that makes sense. I mean, I first and foremost, I'm sorry, brother. I mean, that sense of abandonment, I'm sure, played really heavy on you. And, you get to college, it's like, okay, I got an opportunity to live,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
I've been under this cloud for the past year and plus, with my circumstances at home. And now, I got a new lease and I got to just, I got to try to get my hands around it. So
yeah,
no, 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 no blame or judgment here, man. I mean, I felt my own version of that, going to college myself. I mean, I moved from a different country to the US, and when I got to college, I was like, I was trying to fit in. I was
yeah,
trying to enjoy myself. And again, I wasn't making the correlation between alcohol potentially being problematic. It was just an unlock for me, right? And
right,
everybody else was doing it anyway. So it
right,
wasn't,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
there's no red flag there. So
Nope.
no judgment here. I mean, at what point in your college career did you have any issues with the drinking, or did that come later in life where you started to recognize that this potentially was getting out of hand?
Probably later in life. I mean, this is the thing. My friends noticed it because I got the nickname Drunk Len. You know what I mean?
Okay,
Like,
there you
so,
go.
and still never like really thought of anything. Again, wasn't thinking that was an issue. Didn't even think back to, like I said, didn't have the connection with my father. This is an issue with my father. Now, I still, of course, at that age, I was just having fun. And I was, like I
Yeah,
said, I was the life of the party, making everybody laugh, talking to all the women, people would call me drunk Limb, but I was like, so what? That was last night. You know what I mean? So now, and my grades were good. My grades were good. I mean, I had good grades. I got through school, joined the fraternity, everything was cool. I was still cool, but I did have that nickname, Drunk Lynn. But to me, that was just like, hey, that's a different me. It's when I go party, I'm Drunk Lynn. When I'm not, so when I'm sober, I'm into my books and everything. So
yeah,
I really didn't bother me back then. I was just having a ball, just living. So and again, that was my first time of freedom, and it didn't bother me. It didn't bother me back then.
yeah. You get out of school intact. I don't know if drunk Len stayed at school and you graduated and moved on and took on a different persona. What does that next chapter of your life look like now? You're stepping back into the world,
Mm-hmm.
the real world. You're probably looking for a career. You're looking for a job. And are you still in New York at this time, or
Yeah,
did you go
still
to
in New York.
school?
Yeah, and college
Okay,
was in New York too. I was just in Long Island, New York, so it wasn't far
okay,
away. But I did stay
got
on
you,
campus, but it wasn't. It was still in New York.
got you.
Yeah. So this way it gets interesting. So graduated college. Went. Came home for about a year and a half, 2 years. Stayed home. But even during that time, the drinking. Now I feel like I am an adult. I'm 20,
Yeah,
22 years old. Graduated college. Come home, say to my mother. Um, I said, and it's funny, I never really drank in front of my mother,
Hmm.
but I was at that age where she knew I was drinking. I would go out and drink, and so it wasn't. I didn't have to hide it, but I just never did in front of her. So, the drinking started to get, of course, more and more. Now I'm out of school. I'm working, so I come home and I would go out to a bar maybe, then before I came home. And then after like a year and a half, 2 years, I think I stayed home. I moved out on my own. Now, now I could drink whenever I want because now my mother's not there. So where I didn't want to drink in front of her, now I could drink all the time.
Yeah.
So again, now not even connecting, noticing it, I'm becoming my father. I come home
Mhm.
from work. I don't even go anywhere. I sit there, stop at the liquor store, whatever, get whatever, sit home, drink, watch TV, drink, go to sleep. So now, not even realize that I'm becoming what my father was. This
Yeah.
man I resented. This man I could not stand because of how we lived and everything. I was becoming him.
And you're starting to
And
recognize that in the moment. This is not a retrospective, a kind of place that you've come to. You're sitting there drinking after work, saying, "I remember what this looked like."
right, right.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, because I'm kind of, and I always, it's funny. I look back at it now. I'm kind of just doing mirroring what I saw. Like
Yeah.
when I was a grown man now, I have a job. I could come home and I could sit in the corner and drink. That's what my father did. You know.
Yeah.
So now, when I first realized that the drinking was affecting my life in a negative ways, that I'm so got graduated school, got into one of the top management training programs, banking management training programs in the country. I was working for J.P. Morgan Chase back then, and went through the program, graduated the program, got a great position at one of the bank branches. I was like the youngest manager at the branch, and I'm dealing with high net worth clients, and now I'm drinking in the morning before I go to work. So
Mhm.
I'm having a beer before I go to work, and like I said, the drinking is progressively getting worse. So I have a quick. I remember one day I have a beer. This is going now. I'm starting to drink in the morning. It's probably been doing this for like a month already. I had a beer in the morning. Go to the office. Had a client come in. He had fake ID and everything, and I didn't do a background check on him. I just took his information, took his account. End up it was a fake check like for $100,000. It went through the bank, went through the channels. So they found it was fraud. Found that I opened the account. I
Mhm.
didn't do what I was supposed to do. I got fired. So now, still not admitting that I have a problem, but I'm saying, was it because I was drinking in the morning that I wasn't focused at work?
Yeah.
So I kind of said maybe it's that. Then I was like, whatever. I mean, made an excuse like, oh, well, it couldn't have been that. But I did in the back of my mind think, okay, maybe maybe I shouldn't drink in the morning before I go to work.
Yeah.
But so I was out of work for a little bit. And during that time, I was more trying to find a job, so that kind of took my mind off of drinking. So I wasn't getting that bad. Still was drinking, but kind of slowed down a little bit because I was just worried about if I could pay my bills or anything if I could find a job. Found the job, and that's when I went into mortgage banking. And this was like back when everything in real estate was anybody in real estate was making money. So that's what happened to me. I got in making money, and this is like high, fast pace sales, fast talking. We're going to hang out after work and get smashed and drunk as we can, shit faced, and that's what I fell into. I was like, wow, okay, now I'm making a lot of money, and I could go out and drink and hang out after work.
Right.
I was I was all in, and that's when the problem it really started to get bad, and even during that time, I met my wife, my ex-wife, during that time, and things were going good. But I was just the drinking was getting worse and worse. It was just progressing, and it just started. That's when it started to really take effect.
So at this point, you're in your mortgage. You're in the mortgage space. I'm sure your colleagues are all doing the same,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah,
People are quote unquote working hard, playing
yeah,
hard,
yeah.
right? Are you still drinking in the morning to kind of get yourself going, and then I don't know if it's a one of those kind of like liquid lunches that they talk about, and I'm sure after work,
Oh yeah.
how did you get to a realization that it was indeed a problem? Was it just the frequency that you were drinking, or the reasoning behind why you were drinking, or what started to kind of raise the flags for you Was it yourself? Was it maybe your wife at the time? What did that look like for you?
Well, yeah. So definitely, liquid lunches was a big thing. So I didn't need to drink in the morning because I knew I was drinking at lunchtime anyway. We all went out.
Right.
We drank
Okay.
at lunch. Yeah. So and then, like I said, that went on for years. Really started when thing really started to recognize that okay, maybe this is an issue because things just started to happen. Bad things just started to happen in my life. You know, I ended up getting married. The woman of my dreams, still the most beautiful woman I've ever met. Now she knew I drank, but we didn't live together while we were dating. So she
Okay.
would when I was drinking in the weekends or whatever, we didn't see each other. I would drink and we go out. I have a couple of drinks, but again, she's my girlfriend. I'm trying to impress her, so I didn't get smashed when I was in front of her. I didn't get that drunk. So I drink, but she knew I drank, and and even to a point where she knew sometimes I drank a little too much. But she wasn't living with me. She wasn't there, experience all of it. So to her, it was just like, oh, he drinks, whatever. But
Yep.
when we got married and we moved in together, and she saw it, she even noticed it, and it was like, I mean, we got married. We we had our first child right away. Our first child was born before our first year anniversary. We moved, bought a condo. So a lot of things were happening. So this was just giving me another reason to just numb the pain. So the drinking got were heavier and heavier and heavier. Where she started to notice it, and she was like, maybe you need to, take care of this. And I was, of course, I'm brushing off. There's no big deal, no problem. But then I was like, wow, my wife is noticing it. Then there's the point where I didn't want to come home. Like, so I'm leaving my wife at home with two little babies. Then we had our second child, excuse me. They're only 20 months apart. So
Okay.
we're like 2 years in and we got two kids already. you know,
That's a lot.
a lot, yeah. And I don't want to come home now. Now I'm leaving work. I'm going to the bar. I'm coming home drunk, stumbling drunk at 2, 3 in the morning. My wife is crying in the morning, crying at night.
Mm.
And I'm just like, in the beginning, I'm like, whatever, whatever. You're just stressing me out. But then I started to feel, I was like, wow, I don't want to hurt her, but I don't want to stop drinking either. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then one thing also back to when she was pregnant, which really I got a DUI while she was pregnant. She was 8 months pregnant. I got a DUI. So I left
With your second.
with my second child, right?
Okay.
So she's pregnant, 8 months pregnant. I go out. I leave her at home, go out, hang out at night, get pulled over right up the block from my house, and my 8-month pregnant wife has to come to the courthouse to get me out.
Yeah.
You know, and I even get emotional thinking about that now. Like I remember, we got home and I just got on my knees and I cried and I hugged her and I was like, please forgive me. But as you know, 2 days later I was back at it. As
Yep.
this addiction just has take the power it has over us, I was just back to drinking. And then yeah, and then to the point where she had to leave me.
Hmm.
She left. She got a job with the White House, which I was all on board at first, but then she was like, "I'm leaving by myself. Don't come with me, and I'm not coming back." And she took my two kids with her.
Yeah.
And I'm so in a state of drunkenness and not knowing what's going on. I didn't even fight. I was like, "Go ahead," because in the back of my mind, it's like now I could drink all the time when I want, and no one to say anything to me. My kids are not here, so I don't have to feel bad. So I'm gonna just
Yeah.
now I could keep drinking. So
How old were your children at this time, at this point?
they were babies, maybe 4 and 2,
Wow.
3, maybe going to 3. I'm probably 3 and yeah, yeah. My youngest daughter's still in the crib, so I'm probably not younger than that. Probably 3 and 1, somewhere in that
Wow.
range.
So basically, your life's starting to fall apart,
Yeah,
and
basically.
you just trying to hold on to the one thing that you have control, that you think you have control over, which is you can drink, right?
Right,
And
exactly.
and check out and escape the issues at hand. That's a rough spot. I mean, to be a father and have two young ones, and even the prospect for me of not being able to be around and be their dad, and this I think really cuts to the core of being a black man in America. There's such a you know there's a narrative out there that we're not great fathers, right? That
Mm,
we're not present fathers, and sometimes it's outside of our control, right? We got
right.
a lot of brothers who are caught up in the system and what have you. uh but the prospect of you losing your kids because of something that you did, that's painful, man. And I feel that, and I'm sorry, and I hope the story comes back around and they're part of your life now. But I can imagine how painful that was once you were able to check in on what actually was happening.
yeah,
You
yeah.
know, yeah. Um, so where we at now, man? Your wife is now in Washington D.C. with your kids. You are probably are still in New York,
Yep, still in New York.
um, and you're alone at this point. What's the next step in life look like for you?
So yeah, so when she left, we had to end up selling the condo that we bought. I went to stay with my mother for a little bit. Then I was like, okay, I'm going back and forth to DC. We're going through a divorce. So now she filed the papers for divorce. And I remember I was still drinking heavy up to that time. And I remember the day I got the papers, I just went to the bar and I just blacked out. Right.
Yeah,
I got the divorce papers. But then something in me, I woke up and I was like, you know, I don't know if it was the anger of the papers or the point that I felt that she was trying to get me. I kind of was like, I got to get my life together. I got to get it together. So I was like, kind of stopped drinking for that point because I was going back and forth to court in DC because she filed papers in DC. So I had to actually go down there to go through the divorce proceeding. Excuse me.
yep,
So during that time, I'm not drinking. I've got my by this time I have my own place in Brooklyn. So my first place after getting divorced. So I'm going back and forth to DC, going through everything. And this time I'm doing okay. I'm not drinking. I have some months in. I'm going to AA. Started AA.
okay,
Discovered AA. So I'm going and I'm keeping a level head through the divorce. So I know what's going on. I know what I wanted visitation with the kids. And during that point, I'm focused. I'm like, all right, if we're gonna divorce, fine, I'll give it to you. But we're going back and forth with the children, with the attorneys and everything. Unfortunate, but at least during that time I had my senses. I knew what was happening. I wasn't just
hmm.
drunk all the time.
So
So
sorry, just to ask, you're in AA at this point in time. Is that just to kind of like clean yourself up as you're going through this divorce proceeding? Or was it something that you just knew you needed to handle, irrespective of the fact that you were going through this with your wife at the time and your children? What was kind of the impetus to kind of get you into that space where you sought out help to address this thing that had gotten out of control?
a great question. Yeah, it was like I knew once I got the papers, and even when she first left, I was like, you know, even though I was still drinking heavily, I was like, wow, my kids are gone. Like when I finally came to realization that they're gone, they're in a whole nother state. They're out.
Yeah,
And then when I got the papers, I was like, okay, I need to do something. I have to do something like this. I can't continue like this. I lost my kids. Now I'm getting divorced. And again, I don't know if it was the anger in me or whatever, but I was like, I just can't be like this anymore. This is what's doing this. This is what I
got you.
then that's the point where I started to understand like the alcohol is doing this to my life. Like nothing good is happening when I'm drunk all the time.
Yep.
So yeah, that's when I decided to go to AA, and got a sponsor, and I was able to talk to people in the community about what I was going through. Like my wife filed divorce. I'm back and forth to DC not only to see my children but to go to court now. So and it
Yep.
was crazy. I mean, but during that time, I did stay sober during those few months. Um, and yeah, so we're going back and forth with the kids. So everything was done, and so I knew when I was going to see my kids. That part of my life was over. The divorce is done. So then I get back home and I'm back. I guess that was over. So I felt I had the need to celebrate. And I remember the
Okay.
night I got back home from the day we signed the final papers, jumped on the Amtrak, got home. I remember that night. Stopped at the store. And nothing stopped me. I went straight beeline right to the liquor store, got home,
Mm,
and I was off to the races again,
mm.
drinking again. So,
So you're on the Amtrak, you come home, you go straight to the store. At that point, nothing in your mind, none of the AA, not the sense to like pick up the phone and reach out to your sponsor, none of that. It's out the window. I'm gonna go. I mean, I know probably part of you was like, I'm going to celebrate, but you just came
Right.
through a pretty heavy, a pretty heavy, deal
Right.
in divorce, and you're like, okay, I don't have to travel back to DC anymore to go to
Yep.
court dates. I don't got to have these conversations with my, my now ex-wife anymore about the children. Everything's out in front of me. But no, at no point did you say to yourself, let me pause here and check in on my sobriety, check in on what I need right now. You're just like, I'm going to go for it.
No, yeah, I like you said, that was my excuse to get back into drinking. Like, um,
Hmm.
that's all I was thinking about. Like, I'm I'm done with that part of my life. And I probably part of me is probably needed wanting to stay sober because so I could go through that proceeding, and
Yep.
then at the end of it, celebrate and drink. So
Yep.
yeah, to answer your question, no, I just didn't think about that. I didn't think of calling a sponsor. I didn't think of stopping and hey, you put in so much work for these last few months. Let's keep it going. And and I I give that to not really wanting to stop. I wasn't ready to stop then. You know, I may have said, let me get sober because I have to go to court and I have to wake up in the morning and everything, but I didn't really want to stop because the first thing I excuse I had to celebrate, I did. My divorce is
Yep.
over. I'm divorced now. I got my visitation rights. Now I could drink. You know what I mean? So that's how that went.
So you're right back to where you started. I've talked to a lot of folks, and oftentimes you end up drinking more than,
Hmm.
where you were, the last time around.
Definitely.
What did that next window of time look like for you before you got back to a place where you were reevaluating your relationship again?
Wow, wow, Ray. It's crazy you bring that up because I was going to mention that. Like now, the relapses are getting so much darker and worse in my life. Like every
Yeah.
time I get sober and pick up a drink again, it just 1,000 times worse. And I could feel it. The relapse is getting darker and darker. Like things are happening like I didn't even imagine it could happen. Like it's getting out of control. And you know, I know it's happening. I know it's gonna happen when I pick up the drink. Nothing's good is gonna happen, but like I said, the addiction had control over me. I would still pick up the drink, and like
Mm.
clockwork, something bad would happen a couple of
Yep.
days, or a week, or 2 weeks after I relapsed. It was just
Yep.
it was getting darker and darker at that point.
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine, you don't have to go into the details for I think folks who are listening to this to understand, the darkness that comes with that, and then also, the shame, the guilt, the sense that you don't have the fortitude to really stick to like your plan, and
Right.
and start turning the page on life. How did you get to a point, or what was the final straw for you after spending a lot of time in in this dark place for you to say, I got to, now is the time that I got to do something different?
Wow. So just to go, more years of that, like more years of drinking, more years, trying to get, relapsing, a couple months sober here, relapse again. I was, like I said, a chronic relapse. I just always relapse. That's a huge part of my story.
Hmm.
Um, but again, during one of those times where I was sober, I was going down to see the girls in DC all the time. Then me and my ex-wife started to open dialogue and start talking again. To the point where after a while going back down there, she had an opportunity to come back to New York, and me and her decided to give it another chance.
Mm.
So she came up to New York. We got back together. Ended up getting back together. um, she ended up she ends up getting pregnant. As she's coming back up to New York. So now we're just getting back together, and she gets pregnant. So family's like,
That's a lot.
"What's going on? Like, what happened? Like, we missed that." So we thought about it. Wow, this is new chance and second chance at our marriage. Like I was doing a lot, and I was drinking. That kind of messed things up. We were young. We had a lot of kids. We had our kids right away. So again, we're throwing out all these things. Like we're not changing or trying to fix what happened. We're just throwing out all these excuses why it didn't work the first time, and oh, maybe it'll work the second time. So of
Yeah.
course, it didn't. She ended up losing the baby. She lost the baby. Um,
Sorry.
and that just brought on a whole nother stress, pain, trauma, depression for both of us actually. And
Yeah.
I ended up got worse, went to rehab for the first time. came back. I went to the first time I went to rehab. I went for 28 days. The 28 you can leave now. I was like, I'm counting the days down after the first week after detox. I was like, how much longer I got here? So went and came back home. But 6 months later, drinking again. So fast forward, a few more rehab stints, a few more detoxes, a few more inpatient, outpatient. Going through that. Of course, my wife left me again. So again, I'm on my own by myself, and I'm living in. And I had to. She kicked me out the last time. I had to find this run. I found this rundown apartment. You know, I got a second DUI. Um, so I'm in this apartment that I'm ashamed to even bring my children to, but I had to find something because she kicked me out again. And I'm going to court for the DUI. I had to get an ankle bracelet on my for like 4 months. So that was part of my second DUI. And the only reason I didn't do any jail time or worse because the time between the first and second one was like a long time. So can't remember exactly how many years, but I didn't have to go to jail or anything. So I had to wear the ankle bracelet for 4 months. So that stopped me from drinking for 4 months while I'm living in this crappy apartment, trying to get feet back on track, going to work. As soon as that ankle bracelet came off, you know what happened. I mean, you could guess, back to
Yeah.
drinking. So I had to do another stint in rehab, and this time I said, well, let me rewind. So I'm living in. So I moved to New Jersey, the next state over. I'm in an apartment. I'm not paying rent because I'm drinking heavily, and I'm about to get evicted from my apartment. So during this time, my aunt, who's also an alcoholic, is in the hospital. She's there. She's having kidney and liver issues. Now, at first we didn't know what it was, but I knew she was. She drank a lot. She drank a lot. So
Is this your mother's
this
sister
is
or
my
your
mother's
father's
sister.
sister?
My mother's sister.
Okay.
So she's in the hospital. I go to. So I'm going to visit her. So I'm about to get evicted from my apartment, but I'm drinking. I'm drinking every day. So I'm going to the hospital, drinking in the bathroom of the hospital in her room, and coming back out. So the doctor comes up to me. He's like, "Does your aunt drink? Does your aunt drink a lot?" And I was like, "I know she drinks." So he put me to the side and he was just explaining to me like why her organs are, not functioning well, and it's serious. So and then my mother comes in and he's telling my mother. My mother's like, "Oh, she doesn't drink that much," and I'm like, now something in my head. I'm like, I went through this before. My mother's
Right.
enabling my aunt now, and my father was the same way. But he doesn't drink a lot. He's fine. Leave him alone. And then something, I don't know what it was. God told him something was like, okay, I can't take this again. This is the same thing. Now it's my aunt. And my aunt, who was like a second mother to me.
Yeah.
So fast forward a couple of days later, she passes away. And it's because of the drinking. It was a liver shut down, kidney shut down, organs shut down because of the drinking.
I'm sorry,
At
man.
that point, I was like, I couldn't take it anymore. I was bawling, crying. Everybody's hugging me, consoling me. I went to my aunt and I kissed her. And I whispered in her ear, I said, her name is Georgia. I said, on Georgia, I'm never going to drink again.
Hey guys, I hope you're enjoying the episode. If you are, we'd really love it if you could leave us a rating and a review on Apple Podcast or a rating on Spotify. And of course, please feel free to invite somebody into the conversation. If you feel like you have a story to share on the podcast, why not apply to be a guest? You can do so by completing the form on the podcast description or find it on stackanddays.com. That's stacknday's.com. But for now, let's jump back into the conversation.
I didn't know, Ray, I didn't know what I was going to do to not drink again. I didn't know how I was going to do it, but I just knew at that point. Not only was I not going to drink again, I wasn't going to like stop like before, but I was like, this time I'm going to do something, find something out to change my life, to get my life back on track, to live on purpose, to live abundant life, to be happy. Because I mean, it's been so many years where I wasn't living on purpose. And I just wasn't happy. I was just drinking, stopping, drinking, stopping. So I went to the next day. I went to rehab. I went to Florida. Didn't even go to a funeral. I went next morning. I was on a plane, and that was the point where I was like, no, that's it. I can't do this anymore. And I opened my heart. I prayed, and I said, God, whatever you have for me, whatever I need to do, I will do. And I'm not saying it to a sponsor. I'm not saying it to someone in AA. I'm not saying to someone in a sober community. I'm talking to God now. Like, whatever you need me to do, I am open. Just show me the way. Guide me, please. And I was on a plane and went to rehab.
Man,
As a rehab.
that's powerful, and even in you recounting that moment, I mean, first of all, I'm sorry for your loss. With your aunt Georgia, clearly she made an impact on your life, even in her passing. Maybe
I mean, definitely.
the largest impact that she's made on your life, right? And I could tell just in you kind of recounting that moment how impactful that was, and how that moment was different than
Yeah.
maybe the tens of dozens of moments that come before that. And I'm glad you listened to that voice, and I'm glad you had that conversation with God. It's a quick turn to go
Yeah.
from being in a hospital to being on an airplane headed down to Florida from New York. So
Yeah.
um, you know shout out to you, man. I'm glad you listened to that voice inside of you. See, this is the last stint in rehab for you. Sounds like.
Yeah. This was the last one. And if I can just talk about that experience.
Yeah.
Like I said, I went there, I was open. And this is March. My sobriety day is March 13th to 2020. So right before COVID hit. Like the week
All
before it
right.
hit major. And which was another blessing that I was in rehab during right before COVID.
Yeah.
So I'm in detox, and like I said, so COVID's starting to happen. So people, we're like, now I'm away from the regular population. I'm in a private room, so nobody can really come talk to me, like, because COVID, they didn't know what was going on yet. So they was like, we have to quarantine everybody who's new here, and then especially if you travel from another state, then after
Hmm.
you have to detox away from everybody. So I'm sitting in my room watching TV because I can't do anything. My meals even have to be bought to me. So I'm like, I feel like I'm in prison because I'm by myself. I get a knock on the door. I'm like, who's knocking on the door? So it's this bald headed Russian guy with tattoos. Um, Looks mean as hell. I'm mean as hell. I'm like, can I help you? He's like, oh, he introduced himself. He's like, oh, you know what? I'm going to be your therapist. I said, I know. He said, and he's telling me I'm not even supposed to be here, but I know, you know, you're detoxing away from everybody else. This whole thing with COVID's happening, but I just felt to come and talk to you. I was like, okay. So he sits on the couch across from my bed, and we're sitting there talking. He said, I see you from Brooklyn. I said, yeah. He said, I'm from Brooklyn too. I was like, oh, cool.
Mm.
So the Russian dude, like, and we just start talking and vibing, and he's from Brooklyn, and he's Russian, but he reminds me of like just a regular Brooklyn cat, like I am, a regular Brooklyn dude. So,
Yeah.
and I guess that's why we connected too. We was about the same age, and we just was talking. I'm telling my story, and he's like, wow, he's just talking. He's like, you know, and we talked for hours. I mean, hours. And not that I knew this man was this Russian guy whose family's in a Russian mob and everything was going to change my life. He tells me, you know, I don't know how you feel about it, but I'm the trauma therapist. I'm the lead trauma therapist at this facility. I was like, I didn't even know they had a trauma therapy here. He's like, yeah. He said, I think this is something will help you. He said, why don't you give it a thought? Let me know. He said, it's not mandatory. It's strictly on you decide. But from this conversation we just had for this last 3 hours, I think you have a lot of trauma and you need help. You need to let it out.
Was that the first time where you acknowledged, like, man, yeah, have experienced quite a bit of trauma,
Yeah,
and
I
I
didn't
never even
even
thought about it before?
never thought about it, Ray. I didn't even know I had trauma. You hear the word all the time, but I didn't know what it was.
Yeah.
So he talks about I'm like, okay, sure. I mean, I'll see. But now, as I get into regular population, everybody's talking about this trauma class. Like, don't do that. People come out of there crying. Don't go there. And everybody's talking bad about it because it's only like 8 people that was in the trauma group. So I
Yeah.
was like, okay, thanks for telling me, guys. So he comes back up to me. He was like, and we have our regular therapy sessions, but he comes back to me and says, hey, do you think about the trauma, joining the trauma group? I was like, I don't know. I heard some crazy things about it between me and you. He said, listen, do me this favor. We're both from Brooklyn. Just come sit in there for 5, 10 minutes. If you don't like it, you can get up and leave. I said, okay, no big deal. It was cool. Ray, I went up in there, and 5 minutes I was bawling crying.
Mm.
And again, get emotional thinking about it. I'm like, I don't know what was going on, but I asked God to open my heart to whatever I need to do to stay sober. And I ended up staying in rehab for over 3 months. I said
Wow.
I'm not coming home until I get better. And I went through the full trauma program. And this is the point where, and I don't want to skip over things, but just fast forward a little bit. This is where I realized the trauma I had from growing up, alcoholic dad. I realized I hate him. I resented my father so much, and I learned I had to forgive him.
Mm.
And my father was an alcoholic, and he did the best he could as an alcoholic man to raise me and my sister. He did what an alcoholic can do. He
Yeah.
did the best he could, and I realized I resented him, but to the point where I even turned into him. I became that man who wasn't focused on his children, wasn't loved his children. And my father loved us, but he wasn't focused on us. He wasn't making a difference in our life. He was, finances all in disarray. He was disheveled. He didn't care about himself. He didn't take care of himself. I was becoming that man, and I had to forgive him, and I just learned a lot about me. And see, until we know, and through the trauma, I learned the why I drink. And until we
Mm.
know the why behind the problem, we can't come up with a strategy to change the behavior, of the
Yeah.
issue we have. And that's why I really learned, like, the why behind my drinking, the why.
Yeah.
Why
I
am I
mean, the
doing?
why, yeah, I was going to say the why is such a powerful place. First of all, I remember the first time I tried to ask myself that question.
You
It
know,
took me a minute to
yeah,
really drill down, and I too spent a significant amount of time in therapy in those early, in early sobriety, and I'm still in therapy today. But answering that question around the why gave me something to hold on to, right?
yeah,
It gave me
definitely.
it gave me something to ground myself in, that I could work from. And I think until I was able to answer that question, there is a certain amount of you just feel a little bit lost
All right.
in the journey, right? um I, when you talk about the why and you talk about your father in the same sentence, one of the questions that come to my mind is, did you ever ask yourself what maybe your father's why was? Because what I find in what you've probably, and even in your work, find a lot of this stuff is generational. It's passed down. Clearly, in your experience, it was passed, from your father
Hmm.
on to you. Clearly, it also existed on your mother's side. What were some of the things that maybe were unspoken that your father was dealing with? Because he sounds like he's been drinking for as long as you knew him, at least, right?
Yeah, and it's funny. I did ask myself, because once I was started asking myself that all the time. When I was going through therapy, trauma therapy, I used to wonder, like, wow, wonder why he had this issue with drinking. And I mean, just thinking about his life, to what I've know about it, he was told at the age of 13 he wasn't going to live past 30 because he had childhood diabetes. He died at 40. But imagine being told at 13-year-old child, you by the time you're 25, 30, you're not going to be on this earth. And
Yeah,
back then they told you straight to your face, like, that's his parents and the doctor told him. So imagine that, Imagine again, he grew up in the projects. He had a tough life. Seven siblings. Family didn't come from a lot of money. Came from down south, moved up to New York, moved to the projects, Marcy projects, and he had a tough life too. Then, you know, between the taking a needle, he had to take a needle every day since he was 13 years old, take an insulin shot because of his diabetes. So he was sick. He didn't. He, I don't know if he knew if he wanted to live. If he had a lot to live for. You tell somebody they're gonna die in 15 years. You know, I mean, I can't even
yeah.
imagine that. Like, telling my child that, or me hearing that when I was 15. So, did he want to? What was his? He had no passion in life. What do he want to live for? I'm just trying to. Again, I can't. I'm not. Wasn't in his head, but I'm just trying to think of the things that probably was going through his mind.
No,
You
I
know?
get it, man. I get it. And it's a, you said earlier, when you first were introduced to this concept of trauma, you didn't even know what it was. And I feel
Yeah.
like for people of color, oftentimes trauma is so intimately ingrained into our lives that we're incapable of being able to see it. It's almost like a
Right.
fish in water, right? Like if you were to ask
Exactly.
a fish to identify the water that it swims through, it can't really compute and can't really, muster the understanding of what that would be. And I feel like for us, in walking through life, it's similar. It's like you get to a point where like, okay, trauma is almost like my baseline. It's almost been
Right.
like my normal, and now I need to address what my normal was and try to understand, what life can look like now that I've shone a light on this thing. And unfortunately for your father, he was never able to do that. But his
Right.
life is filled with trauma. I mean, the dude's been, he was sick his entire life. I mean, that, coming, from a place where you're impoverished and having to deal with the financial pressures and, and all the rest of it. I mean, and anyways, I don't want to go, any further down that. I think it's important to highlight the fact that we deal with a lot of pressure, that I
Right.
think is unique to us culturally. Whether you're, a person of color in the United States, whether in my family is from Jamaica, we had
Right.
our own challenges and, in there. And, I think it's important to highlight. And I think that's one of the things that kind of unifies us in a way where we can support each other on. So
Definitely.
I
Definitely.
appreciate you kind of recounting, your experience. Fast forward, you are now, a sobriety coach. You're a life
Yeah.
coach, and if I'm correct, you particularly help folks in early sobriety, which is like those are the most vulnerable,
Yes. Yes.
fragile, moments in someone's journey. As you know, considering the fact that you had been through so many relapses and so many
Mhm.
ups and downs in trying to pursue sobriety, what does your practice look like now that you are sitting on the other side of the desk trying to help folks who are trying to turn their lives around?
Well, you saw the big smile came on my face, right, when you when you mentioned
Yeah.
the practice. But yeah, I mean, yeah. So like I said, I got sober, and I was like, for my first thing was that, like I said, I not only wanted to get sober because I've done that before. I want to get sober and live. Like,
Yep.
what is my purpose now in life? This is a whole different thing. I dealt with my trauma. I just felt the passion to live again now. Like, back in the past, I got sober. My first thought was, okay, how can I just stay sober today? How can I not drink? Like, almost scared to even do anything, to walk out the house or to be around certain people or to talk or to have a certain emotional feeling. Because I always thought that was going to bring me back to the bottle. Now I was like,
Mm,
no, we're going to get back. We're going to set some goals for myself, get passionate about life. I want to be happy, so and and I think that early sobriety, like you said, that's when we're the most vulnerable, but that's the greatest time to like sit and take a deep breath and plan your life out. As soon as you get sober, like, you come home, and I was in rehab, so of course I couldn't drink in rehab, but now I'm home.
yeah.
Now you have to start the work. Now you have to really get, okay, now it's up to me. Now I got to get going. You got your, you know motivation or inspiration, whatever you want to call it, in rehab. You got your tools. Now you got to really put them to work. And I feel like in early sobriety, this is the time where, if you're gonna, this is the time to plan out your life now. You know what I mean? Not when you're, I feel, you see people 5, 6, 10 years sober, 20 years sober, but they're not. Again, they're just surviving. And I've seen that a lot. I still talk to people today. I see in recovery rooms and AA rooms, like, they're just surviving. And I was like, I don't want that. I didn't want that for myself. I said, why can't I be sober? And if God gave me this gift, now I got to run with it. Why can't
Yep.
we? And it's funny, Ray. People in the sobriety community, we are the most intelligent, ambitious, creative people, and it's like, we get sober, we just survive. We don't live. We don't
Mm,
use what God gave us. And I'm like, no, I could do things. I could have a dream. I could have goals, and I could achieve them. So, and it's this point in early sobriety, this is the time to, like, if you don't address those things, your spirituality, your physical, your health, your emotions, even your finances. These are things, if you start addressing them, getting them back together, these things, that's what keeps you sober. You know what I mean? Not just worrying about, if I see a commercial about beer, am I going to go out and drink again? You have to take control back. And like I said, I deal with people in early sobriety, just, help them reclaim their lives and rediscover their purpose. You know what I mean? That's what's important. Show gratitude for the opportunity we have and run with it. And
yeah.
yeah, that's why I love helping people in early sobriety. But now's the time to take it back, take your life back. We don't have to go through this vicious cycle of the relapse all this time. You know what I mean? We could
No,
we could take control back.
no, totally. I mean, I love that. I am curious. What's your perspective on now that you are in a support role to folks who are at early sobriety? How do you support someone who's going through relapse? Because for a lot of folks, that's just part of many individual stories, right? Whether it be 1 or 20 relapses,
Right,
hopefully it's not they don't get to that point because I feel like the more relapse you have, the harder it is to kind
all
of get
right, come out.
yourself back. But how do you support folks in that, being that you are so intimately aware of what relapse means in your own journey?
Well, again, I always go back to, again, when I used to relapse. And again, it's so deflating. Like, you're so ashamed when you relapse, when you especially when you have time in and you go back to relapse. I think that one of the main things, and this is something I go through, is that be self-aware. Are you honest with you? Are you ready to stop drinking? Are you ready to put down the bottle? There's a lot of times we all say, I mean, there's a lot of times I would say, "Oh, I want to stop." I didn't really want to stop if I thought about it, because I wasn't willing to do what it took to stop. You
Yeah,
can't say it, but your behavior is totally opposite of what you said you want to do. That's with anything in life. Your behavior has, yes, whatever you say, your behavior has to mirror what you're saying, or nothing's going to change. You know what I mean? So you could say whatever you want. Yeah, I'm going to get sober, but do you really want to get sober? You know, and be honest with yourself. Sometimes if you're not ready, you're not going to get sober. You're not going to commit. You know what I mean? So
yeah.
that's a major thing as far as where the relapse. So you can't just talk yourself into getting sober. You have to really want to do it and then commit to it.
I agree with you. I also am curious. There are so much feelings of shame and of guilt that come with the occurrence of a relapse.
Right.
How does one deal with that? So yes, they may not have been necessarily ready to quit, and they maybe didn't get to a point where they were willing to put in the requisite work to be able to stack some days.
Right.
But how do you then deal with the emotional fallout of what comes with relapse, right? Like the sense that maybe you failed, the sense that that there is some shame and some guilt around the fact that you weren't able to pursue the path.
The thing with, and again, I think a lot of us were so resilient, um, when it comes to, especially when we know we want to change, we know we don't want to live like this anymore. And like I tell people, I mean, it's nothing to be ashamed of, but we still have to keep trying. And if you're angry when you have a relapse, I feel that's a good thing, because you
Right.
know that this is not what you don't want to live this way anymore. So if you're angry about it, now if you relapse and you're just like party time, now we're back to party and everything, then no, you're gonna, again, it's gonna get dark for you. But
Yeah.
I still remember what kept me going even when I relapsed, that I would get so angry, and that would make me. And sometimes it maybe took a couple of weeks or a month or so to get back on track, but I got back on track. So I'm like, and I tell people all the time, if you do relapse, again, nothing to be ashamed of. It's not, that's part of a lot of our journey. A lot of us. I mean, not a lot of people get it right the first time. You know what I mean? So that's part of
Hmm.
the journey. But I mean, the good thing is to not sit in that relapse for too long, because it gets darker. You relapse, get right back up, and get back on, get back in the journey, get back on track. So,
Yeah.
and again, I feel like when if you're upset about it, that means, I feel that's a good thing. Like, hey, that means you don't want to go back to this way. You don't want to live like this. So now let's get right back to what we were doing. And it's about to keep trying. It'll come. It'll come. It's not. No one said it'll come the first time or even the fifth time, but it'll come if you keep fighting it.
Yeah. I mean, relapse is not failure, right? It's just
Exactly.
a checkpoint, right?
Right.
What mechanisms do you use today? I mean, 4 years in, to your own sobriety, and then also mechanisms that you coach other folks to tap into to, promote their success. That's, I think that I feel like that's huge, right?
Big
For
time.
such a long time, for many of us, we've turned to alcohol as a mechanism to cope with life.
Right. Right.
So what do you turn into these days, and what do you coach other folks on?
Well, I mean, one of the things I do, I'm what helps me stay sober is, having a schedule and doing things consistently, and it's all about, what makes me feel good, like prayer, meditation. I work out, I take care of my body now. I'm sure if you saw me 4 years ago, I was probably like 40 pounds heavier. You know, things that I know would keep my mind sharp and bring joy to myself. So, and I tell clients I coach, you'll get told a bunch of things that you have to do or you should do, but no, you just have to find what keeps you sober, and that was something you do every day. Now, I do a lot of I work out and things like this, but I don't work out every day. But one thing that I do every day for my sobriety is prayer. And I say a prayer in the morning and the night. I've said it every day for the last since the day I got sober, even when I was in rehab. And that covers. I feel that keeps me sober for the day. That one thing. If I don't do anything else for my sobriety, I do that. you know. And I said sometimes it could be one thing, it could be five things, but you have to do something every day for your sobriety. Something that when you do it in the first thing in the morning and you do it at night or throughout the day, that's gonna keep your mind off of alcohol, off of drugs, and that'll remove the desire to drink. You know, and that one thing when I say that prayer in the morning, I just feel covered, and that's that one thing I do to not keep me sober throughout the day. That's one of the tools I use. And I tell everybody, two different. It'll be tools will be different for everybody. You just have to find something for you, not what other people say you should do, not what other people tell you you need to do or you have to do to be sober. I don't think that I don't apply to that. I mean, you find what's going to keep you sober, something that you could do on a daily basis, and that I'm gonna do this every day for my sobriety, and that's what and it works. And I think you should keep doing it consistently, but do it consistently.
Yeah, consistency is huge, and I do. I'm. This podcast is pretty agnostic when it comes to like programs and what you should do, what you shouldn't do. At the end of the day, whatever you can do to help to support, your sobriety, I feel like
Right.
that's what you should be zeroing in on. In terms of finding the things that keep you sober. I think that that's really important, and I have I never subscribed to a program personally. I just kind of pulled together my own program, so to speak, and there are certain things that I do, consistently to keep on track. One of the reasons why I appreciate that, because the moment when you maybe stop doing those things, those are the red flags that you're kind of getting away from your path, right?
Right.
So you
Right.
got to kind of make sure that you're doing those things to bring yourself back into that space that supports the road that you've chosen for yourself.
Exactly.
And I think at the
Exactly.
end of the day, like that's the power, is that this road of recovery, sobriety, whatever you want to call it, is a road that hopefully at some point you've been able to choose for yourself.
Right. Exactly.
What does community look like in for you? I mean, we I feel like sobriety, is one of the and recovery is one of those things where oftentimes like community is a point where folks can really lean on to prop them up. Is that something that's part of your story in keeping you on your path? Is community a big piece?
Oh, a huge piece. A huge piece. Yeah, and these are people I've known since I started my recovery journey that I kept in touch with, and that seen me through the bad times, the good times, the bad times again. Then now being sober for this amount of time and doing what I'm doing. So these are people. I mean, and I think it's important that having community, especially sober community, is important on your journey to sobriety, and not. And again, I always say, I mean, I still have friends, and who's also important to me are friends that I had from before that saw me when I was in my addiction.
Hmm.
That love me and care about me now and support my sobriety as well. So obviously, I mean, again, you hear these things. You got to get rid of anybody you hung out with before. I mean, I agree. You need to get rid of some people if they're not going to support your sobriety. But if somebody who cares for you and loves you and they've been friends all your life and they're there to support you, that's just as important as with anybody else that's in sober, getting sober, just like you. Um,
Yeah.
like my mother and my sister, they've been the my biggest cheerleaders. My always been with me, and those are two of the people I hurt the most. My mother
Hmm.
and my sister, but they're the two who really kept me together. Like was there in my corner. They was there when I was in rehab. Called them every day. Spoke to my therapist. They spoke to my therapist, and they were there when I got out. You know, so that having people in your corner that you love, that love you and support your sobriety is important. And the sober community is just so important. Like, look, I met you through this community. We're online. I mean, things like that. I mean, social media is a big thing, a way to meet people nowadays, which I think is
Yep.
great because now I can connect with so many other people and so many other people in this space that we're out here, recovering out loud. They say to help other people. And something I want to do that we and you have spoken and with also in the future is to, really men of color. I think is so important. If you don't mind me touching on this,
No, please.
it's so important. I think, like we said earlier, like I look at my father and look at myself. Like it was tough for me to admit that I was, I had an issue with alcohol. I didn't know who to turn to, and I didn't know it's not common for us to say that we have this issue, not to our friends, not to our loved ones, to anybody, especially as a black male, a man of color. Like you tell me what other man just stands so alone in what other culture that a man stands so alone than a black man, a man of color. Like we have
Yep.
there's so much pressure on us that we're supposed to be this fictional superhero character, like, excuse me. And you're supposed to be strong. You're supposed to not cry. You're supposed to, not have feelings. Don't be emotional. Don't therapist. What do you mean? You gonna tell somebody your feelings? Like, we're not supposed to be that person. So a lot of us don't get the help, and we end up being so much worse off than we could have been if we just seek this help. And like again, like I said, the trauma therapy, I was like, what is that? I don't know what that is. But luckily this man, who a man you would not think would come into my life, introduced me to that. And just going through that, like that's another reason why I decided I knew I wanted to be a coach and leave my financial career of 20 plus years to do this, not do this work now. Because it's so important. Like somebody helped me, I must help other people. And if I can help men of color especially, um, because I know the hurt and the pain and the shame of admitting that we have this issue and getting the help to get it. I know there's so many men out there just suffering in silence, and they're going to continue to suffer, and it's going to really get bad before it gets better if they don't have anybody else out to they don't have anybody to reach out to or know of
Yeah.
anybody to reach out to, you know?
No, I think you're absolutely right on that. I mean, and I've certainly opened the at least for me, I'm saying, hey, look, if you need someone to reach out to me. You know what I mean? Because I think it's so important. I know that you do the same through your practice, and you're right. I mean, black men unfortunately are have this mantle that we feel like we need to hold up, and and feel like something that I've come to 3 years almost into my own journey is that I don't want to have to be responsible for what other people think that I should be holding. You know
Right,
what I mean? Like I do have feelings. I am a human being. And I feel like just because I am vulnerable or because I now speak about these things doesn't make me soft. You know what I
right.
mean? It actually, in my opinion, is courageous. It's a
Mhm.
courageous act. So I'd love to be able to, in partnership with you and other brothers, like normalize that
Definitely.
dialogue, because it's not just about alcohol, right? Like I think
Right.
even for brothers who don't have an issue with the substance, they very much are being held to this like standard, which is effectively unfair.
Right, exactly.
It's
I
an
agree.
unfair standard to be held to. So I appreciate you for coming on and making it a point to touch on that because I think it's really important.
Oh no, yeah, thank you for allowing me to do so. Thank
I want to ask you about your mom today. I mean, she's
you.
clearly like experienced, so much loss at the hands of the substance, and I'm sure in a lot of ways she probably holds her own degree of like guilt, but probably sees and feels a huge degree of happiness in the road that you chose, as opposed to her having to bury you like she had to her husband and ultimately her sister. Like, where's your mom at today? How's she doing?
Well, thanks for asking, man. And yeah, again, you see a smile on my face. I mean, my mother she's a exceptional. I mean, I don't know what words I have to say for her. She's just great, and yeah, and I feel for her sometimes. I think about that because she saw my father go through that. She saw my aunt go through that. She lost both of them, and then she saw me. And my mother, it's funny, like she's such a leader. Like she sometimes feels guilty. Like my son, like there was a long time she wouldn't. I would come to her, and she would. she would never say that I'm an alcoholic or that I had a problem with alcohol. She wouldn't just admit that to herself. Or even when I came to her and said, I think I do have a problem, she's like, no, you don't. She was trying to tell
Mm,
me just to make me feel better. Even though she didn't even know that was enabling, but just even to make me feel better, she was like, I don't think you do. But I think because of the person she is, the caring person she is, and the leader she is, when she sees people close to her hurting or going through stuff, she feels that what can I do? And if I'm not if they're not changing, is it on her? And she takes such a
yes.
burden because she's the oldest daughter of seven. The same thing. Her and my father had seven siblings. She's the oldest of seven. She sees it ran. Her mother passed away from the disease as well, so it runs rampant in my family on both sides.
Wow.
Then she saw her sister, her only sister, pass away, who was her best friend, and she saw my father, and then me. Um, and I got me. She always tells me how proud she is of me. So, and I'm just so happy that I could give her that I didn't have to be
Yeah.
another one who died.
Yeah.
I mean, I could imagine what that would have done to her, or end up in jail or somewhere else. You know what I mean? That I'm so happy that I'm still in her life. We're still in each other's lives, and she loves on me. She praises me. She's proud of me. All that. I'm her only son, so she loves me to death anyway. But yeah, just for she's like in a good. She's happy to see me now, but I know that a lot was a burden on her with my aunt and my father. But I think her seeing me, that puts her in a good state, a good space, and she's there to support me. So she's happy now, and she's still still a great mom, still being a great mom. That's all I can say
That's
about it.
awesome. That's awesome, man. I mean, I mean, obviously an incredible gift that you've been able to like work towards for yourself, but what an incredible gift to be able to give your mom. A lot of folks, in our communities live their whole lives not being able to see something differently,
Right, right.
than they and feel and experience something different than what they know to be their experience, and and that's something you've been able to give to your mom. So, I love that. I love hearing that. So I'm glad we were
Thank,
able to touch on that. So shout out
yes,
to your
sir.
mother for that, for for
Thanks.
sticking in there for you. Last two questions, man. One, in your darkest days, how would someone have known that you were struggling if you didn't explicitly tell them that you were struggling?
Wow. Probably from my behavior, because I'm sure people saw me, friends or people that saw my behavior, um, but it's not like to, and I think I'm going where you're trying to go. I was quiet. I never told anyone what I was going through. They would have to experience it. Like if you didn't see me out on a drunk night, you would not know that what was going through, what I was going through. If you wasn't there in the house when I was stuck up in the house drinking for a month straight, every day, all day, you wouldn't know. You know. So yeah, during my darkest times, I wasn't telling anybody. I just kept it to
Yep.
myself. It's something
Suffering in silence.
yeah, suffer in silence. I didn't, I had no idea who to speak to, you know, and other than I didn't want to tell close friends, didn't want to tell family. Again, that shame, that what are they gonna think of me? Oh, an alcoholic. Like, oh, it's that stigma that comes with that. When I was in addiction, I just didn't want anybody to know about it. So I hid,
Yep.
didn't answer phone calls. I was just like you said, suffering in silence, big time.
Well, with that being said, for someone who's sitting there, for a brother who's maybe maybe listened to this episode and they're saying to themselves, "I got a problem that I can't deny anymore, but I don't know necessarily what my first step could be." What would you suggest to that brother?
Well, one, if they could admit that, I think they're on the right path. One, if you could admit that you have a problem and you want to get help, I think that's the first step, and I think that's a courageous step. And also, it's nothing. It's also you touched on it. It's more. It takes more courage to admit and to ask for help than to just not say anything. So I would say, go asking for help. We must ask for help. There's nothing wrong asking for help, because that's just gonna, you'll see yourself grow and live a better life if you could get the help. I've gotten the help. Ray, you've gotten the help. We're examples. Um, and then the help could look different for everybody. I mean, I don't know if I don't know you personally. It could be therapy. It could be just reaching out to someone in the sober community. There are people out there, so if you're listening, anybody who's listening to this and you need help, there's people like Ray and myself and other people you can reach out to. If you feel you feel more comfortable speaking to a therapist, believe me, this changed my life. Me speaking to a therapist, and I told you my story. I had no idea what I was getting into, but I spoke with another male, and he helped me change my life. And not only changed my life, because he changed my life, it changed my daughter's life, who I have a great relationship with now. I'm in both their lives. If it wasn't for me doing that thing, becoming vulnerable, whatever you want to call it, if it wasn't for that, I wouldn't be in my daughter's lives. Well, my daughters are happy to say I'm their father today. I won't be friends with their mother, who all that we went through, she's one of my best friends today. And now we're raising our two daughters. I wouldn't be able to have for my mother to be proud of me, and now to ease that pain of losing a husband and a sister. Now she sees her son who was going on that same path. Now he's back. He has his life together. So think about, before we suffer in silence and not tell anybody, think about what changes in our life we can make and how it could affect your other people in your life that you love if we make a change. And if we're courageous enough to get out there and, ask for the help. And again, sometimes, Ray, I'm like, you think about it, who we ashamed in front of? I mean, people that judge us will judge us when we're trying to get better, and they judge us doubly when they see us out there acting up because we're in an addiction. So maybe those are the people we don't need in our lives anyway. I'm sorry to feel so blunt, but the same people that'll tell you, make fun of you for getting sober is the same people that's talking behind your back, like, look at drunk Len, calling me drunk Len, right? So, I mean, what are you gonna say something about us the other way? So, but I mean, again, as a black man, we're here as black men talking. It's ask for help, seek help. If this is one thing you want to get help in, it's this, because it'll change your life. Believe me. I said today, truly blessed that I don't have the desire to drink at all. So that all happened because I got help. Because I tried it for years on my own, and it didn't work. But what worked is getting help.
Help, man. It's such a hard thing to ask for when you live a life, across many different aspects of life where you're just not expected to ask for it.
Right.
Leonard, I appreciate you, brother. Thank you for coming on. But before you do go, where can folks find you for your practice, and also just to reach out if they need an ear?
Oh yeah, the easiest way to reach me is on all social platforms at Empowered Through Sobriety. Reach me on Instagram, Facebook. Sign up for our newsletter. You can keep in touch. You'll find all my information, email, everything at Empowered Through Sobriety. You can find me.
Perfect. Look, bro, appreciate you, man. Thanks for coming on and sharing your story and your journey. Definitely have appreciated the conversation, and let's stay connected.
Oh, Ray, appreciate you so much, man. And thank you so much for, allowing me to talk. It was great, man. Appreciate it.
You got it, brother. All right, y'all. I'll see you next week for another episode of Stacking Days. Until then, be well, one day at a time. Peace. I appreciate you guys listening to the Stacking Days podcast. I hope this episode added value to your recovery and wellness journey. Before we go our separate ways, let's connect on social. You can find us on TikTok and Instagram at Stacking Days, or via the website www.stackingdays.com. By supporting the show, you can play a direct role in amplifying people of color in their pursuit of recovery. The easiest way to do that is to subscribe or hit the follow button. This way you'll never miss an episode, all while playing an active part in creating the ecosystem where diverse voices and healing matter. This show is for the purpose of education and connection and is not a replacement for therapy or recovery care. For more information on the resources and support available, take a look at SAMHSA and some other resources shared in the description. Until we meet again, be well, one day at a time.